So I might be one of the only people who doesn't actually remember the first time I met Tom Johnson. My mother had actually known him when she was young. They'd been in some sort of youth group together. And so she had mentioned to him, she had seen him on Shady Sides campus at some point in time and had told me some stories about him. And so I knew who he was, but I don't actually remember the first time that I met him. But it would have been sometime in the 90s, the late 90s, when I was in high school and when he was starting kind of the summer programming that was the predecessor to the Neighborhood Academy. So that was when I first became involved, was in the 90s when I was in high school. Tom was starting the summer program. I had a very close friend, Peter Herr, who was one of Tom's lacrosse players, and Bart Griffith, who knew Tom Johnson very well. They had both reached out to me. I don't think either of them were going to be in Pittsburgh for the summer. So they had reached out to me to say, hey, you're going to get a call from Tom. You should consider doing this. And I did. So I, at the time, was a lifeguard, actually with another very good friend from Shadyside. And I just kind of told him, hey, there's going to be a few weeks. Can I work my schedule around being able to be there in the mornings to tutor? And so I did that for a handful of years. And that's when I met both Anthony and Brett, was back in the 90s doing that programming. So it's been a long time since I've known about the Neighborhood Academy. Interestingly enough, when they started, where were they? On Penn Avenue, in that, I can't remember the name of the building, but that's where the school started there. I had been involved with my Sunday school. We were looking for some community outreach, and so that was when we were serving dinners at the Neighborhood Academy, and so we came in a handful of times to serve dinners with my Sunday school class. So that was kind of getting back involved with the Neighborhood Academy. And then interestingly enough, I was a banker when they were looking to build the new campus here and were looking for financing. And so I remember coming back to the school with a colleague from an analytical side to be talking about the construction and the financing. And that might have been the first time I formally met Jody, but obviously, saw and re-engaged with Tom again. And so was kind of part of the funding from a degree or two of separation, but part of the funding of building this campus. And it was shortly after that I re-engaged with Brett and Anthony and got a little bit more involved on the tutoring side, and then eventually joining the development committee and the board. So it's been 25 years with little steps all the way through. And I can't help but age myself since this is the 21st birthday, so that's okay. We know that that's what's going on here. So been involved for a while. So I was trying to think about, there's so many that I remember that now that it's so far away, they've gotten a little more dim as memories, but they were just so awesome. So in the summer program before the school started, Tom and Jody were very specific about having, I think we called them field trips at the time, but they were all sorts of experiences that Tom wanted the students to have. So not just the math and the English and the tutoring and the, played a lot of basketball in the back of churches. But a couple of the field trips, one that I missed, and I think for the rest of my life, I'll be upset that I missed it. They went to the OBGYN, and all the kids talked about for days and days after that trip was that Tom Johnson got up in the stirrups in the doctor's office. And that, that left an imprint in their minds, right? And so I remember being very upset that I missed that. But so that was one field trip that I know of. There are kids out there that remember that, and will remember it till they die. Another field trip we had, though, was we went to the Allegheny County Jail. And they had set us up in a conference room, and they had chairs lined up, and that's where we were going to go in and sit. And we probably had, gosh, at that point in time, there were probably 20, 25 students, and then we had a handful of faculty and tutors and that sort of thing, chaperones that had come with us. And so we all came into the room was empty, and we all sat down. And they had 4 inmates that were going to come in, and they were going to sit on a panel. And if I recall, I think it was Tom who was going to just kind of ask them some questions and have some discussion. And one of my favorite students, he's sitting next to me to my right, and it's probably another chair or two, and that's the walkway where the inmates are coming in. And they're coming in from behind us. We're facing the front of the room. And they were shackled. They had wrists and ankles. So when they came in, they were actually making a decent amount of noise. And the student next to me, just immediate fear, just leapt out and was 3 seats down from me over here, just sitting here going, and in his mind, he's looking at me like, what are we doing here, you know? So anyway, so we go on with it. They sit down, we start the discussion. Tom asks a lot of good questions. There's a lot of good dialogue. Then he opens it up to the students for questions. And that same young man who had been sitting right here, who's now sitting down there, his first question, he raised his hand. He was ready the whole time. He'd had this question in his mind. He asked the 4 inmates, he said, I'd like to know if any of you believe in Jesus Christ. And I thought, what a poignant question for a 13-year-old boy to ask after he'd listened to these 4 inmates give their life story and their history, why they're here, how they feel about being here. You know, they had gone into all that. And that was his question. He wanted to understand that core question. And I thought that was just so cool. So anyways, that was another one that's, I could go on with a whole handful, you know, all over the place, but those are the 2 that always I think back to and they make me smile. So I would say the Neighborhood Academy is life-changing. I think if you went back and talked to students, you're always going to have a couple students that maybe feel like, meh, it wasn't for me, I didn't make the right decision. But the vast majority of the students that come through these doors, I think they know instantly that it's changed their lives. And they look back years and then more years and continue to recognize how it changed their lives and the trajectory of their lives. So I think I really think at the base of it, that's what the Neighborhood Academy is doing. Happy 21st anniversary, Neighborhood Academy.